I am ranking the entire alphabet from best to worst, but this only applies to the standard modern English alphabet. If I were to bring other languages into this, it would just get way too complicated. There are a few categories I'm using to determine how based or cringe a letter is. I've whipped up a fake sample letter here to walk you through the grading process. Up here we have the letter name. For this sample I've called it John Letter. It makes the sound except at the end of a word, in which case it goes. For this, I'm grading consistency. Does the letter always represent the same sound, or is it completely up in the air how you're supposed to pronounce it in any given word? For John Letter here, it would be pretty consistent, probably a B+. Also, one of the most important parts of the letter is the shape, in lowercase and uppercase. There are a few different things with this that I'm rating. Is it easy to write quickly and clearly? Does its shape fit the sound it makes? Do the lowercase and uppercase forms resemble each other? Does it look unique from other letters? Does it look cool? Also, over here is the attack and defense of the letter, plus any special abilities. If you're confused on this part, just keep in mind, defense is a separate stat from HP. And finally, cultural impact. What does the letter mean to people? Does it mean anything before the word whole? Not many letters apply to that one, but for those that do, it is a significant plus. Also, how many and what curse words is this letter linked to? I'm gonna give this standard number out of 10 score, of course, but also a letter grade, that is, A+ to F. As you would assume, I will be doing this in alphabetical order of the first letter of the letter's name spelled out into a word. This serves no practical purpose, I just wanted to make everything more confusing. Anyway, the first letter of the alphabet is... wait for it, I'm building up suspense here. A. Like all vowels, the letter A can be pronounced a variety of ways. A, all sorts of stuff. It's completely inconsistent. However, this is of course not unique to the letter A. Basically, any vowel in the English language can be pronounced as any other vowel in at least one situation. So the letter A is really bad at being pronounced a single way, but relative to other vowels, it's pretty standard. The shape of A is very unique. Most letters share certain features with other letters, but the uppercase A looks only vaguely like a capital V turned upside down, and the lowercase doesn't really resemble any other letters at all. Looking unique is usually an advantage, because it means people won't mistake that letter as a different one, but the trade-off in this case is that lowercase a is a really complex letter, relatively speaking, which makes it difficult to write quickly and clearly on paper, considering especially how common a letter it is. Plus, there's like 5 different ways to write lowercase a, and that just ain't it. However, the letter A can be used in conjunction with whole to beget a whole, which is not a bad whole word, all things considered. Anyway, the letter A may be synonymous with being first, with being top-notch, being number 1, but for a rating, it's getting a 10 point -1 1/2. Which is 8.5 out of 10. For a letter grade, it gets a B. The letter after A in the alphabet is H. Now, you'll see the letter H a lot in words, but most of the time when it shows up, it doesn't make its own sound. H in combination with the letters C, S, T, W, P, and kind of G are all digraphs that represent entirely separate sounds. Most of these digraphs are pretty consistent, except for CH and TH, and the letter on its own is usually pronounced normally, but there comes an issue in words like dishonest, where wait, did you mean to say dishonest? No, I didn't. Look at it. By any logical measure, that should be pronounced dishonest. Swethert, Crafed, this issue could easily be solved by representing the sound h with a different letter, or by giving all these sounds their own unique letters, but even so, the letter wouldn't be entirely squeaky clean anyway, because there's a bunch of words where it just isn't pronounced at all. Plus, like I mentioned, CH is about as consistent as C on its own, not very much, and TH represents 2 separate sounds with no way to tell them apart at all. H is the source of a lot of confusion. I think it's too large of a letter in my opinion to be used as something that mostly just modifies other letters, and this applies to writability too. I feel like it should be more the size of like An apostrophe, or the soft sign in Cyrillic alphabets is a good comparison. The shape should signify more that it's just the previous letter except different. I'm giving it a C, but for a number it gets 6.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 out of 10. Now, the third letter in the alphabet is R. It's a very humorous letter. It's funny. I look at the letter R and I can't stop laughing. I'm laughing at the letter R. It's probably the stupidest letter I can think of. You know Steve Urkel? Where's the vowel in the word Urkel? Or bird, Earl? This is a whole category of vowels, actually, that are named after the letter R. They're called R-colored vowels, which sounds very politically incorrect. Fortunately, there is another name for them called rhotic vowels, which is a wonderful name for them, in my opinion, because it means vowels that are represented by the Greek letter rho, and none of them are represented by the Greek letter rho. Anyway, R as a vowel is a mainly American phenomenon. Most Australian people and British individuals either delete it or replace it with something else. It gets extra points for that. However, the capital and lowercase letters R don't really resemble each other at all. The uppercase R is shaped like a P holding a cane, and the lowercase is, I guess, some kind of hunchbacked gamma, neither of which I would particularly associate with the sound that R makes. The letter R is also connected to probably the second most potent slur. I'm not sure if that gives it extra points or points off, but it definitely affects its score somehow. I think, in my opinion, all things considered, all in all, with all the factors weighed, with all the information in consideration here, I think R gets an R+, and an R out of 10. After the letter R is another one of my favorite letters in the alphabet, and one I've been hyping up for over 5 seconds. The letter B is an outstanding letter. It is completely unmatched in the rest of the alphabet, ignoring the several letters that look exactly the same except flipped or rotated. Now, I don't know if you knew this, but I have somewhat of a personal connection to the letter B, as you can imagine, but I will continue to stress that B is objectively the funniest letter. Think of all the great words containing the letter B. Boobah, bungalow, Baphomet, the B word, bees, brain cancer. Even among whole words, it's probably the best. Be whole. Think of the weight that carries. Be whole. Even in its most crass form, the letter B is still giving us a message of holistic encouragement. And its shape is great too. It's squishy, it's round and friendly. How can you not immediately fall in love? It's extremely consistent. It's only occasionally switched to P in words like absolutely, but otherwise just about always B. In chemistry, it represents boron, which is great news for the boron lovers out there. Even as a note in a musical scale, B is top of the line. In fact, let's take a listen right now. Isn't that amazing? I'm blown away. Personally, I've got chills. It's practically perfect, and as far as a letter grade, the first letter that pops into my head when I look at the letter B is the letter A. A+, in fact, actually. The only grade that it could ever describe the letter B is A+, 9.8 out of 10. If we move on to the next letter in the alphabet, which, if you weren't aware, is the letter C, things get a little bit more disappointing. The main claim to fame for C is that it can't stick to a single thing. It's sometimes pronounced K, and sometimes S. Together with H, it's pronounced Ch, and sometimes other stuff as well for no reason. I don't like the shape that much. It looks more like a vowel than a consonant to me, but the capital form is the same as the lowercase form, which is convenient, I guess. C is an important note in music, for example, middle C, which sounds like this. Wow. It sounds terrible, I know, one of the worst. The main curse word C is linked to, the C word, is pretty neat at least, but it doesn't even mean anything combined with whole. The letter C deserves a D, and a 4.51 repeating out of 10. Now, the letter Q is completely unnecessary for the English language, however, it does look pretty cool. You could say it looks pretty cool, but not in front of me, because I would kill you. So, the letter Q usually represents either Qu or K, although it is so uncommon that consistency barely even applies as a rating. You're not even allowed to write the letter Q without also putting a U next to it. It's against the rules. That's kind of pathetic. The uppercase Q looks like a vowel, if anything. The lowercase lines up with P, D, B, etc., which is nice, but it only appears before U anyway, so who cares? It is very confusing to write. Both the uppercase and the lowercase have several different forms. It's like a letter that's only used for decorative purposes. Q does have one main thing going for it, though. Its rarity and general uselessness have turned it into one of the cool letters. Logically, it should be shoved towards the back of the alphabet with the other rare limited edition letters like X and Z. It doesn't really make sense for it to be so close to the beginning like this. There's plenty of stuff named after the letter Q as well. Q-tips, Q-score, Q-value, Q-force, Q-factor but for bicycles, quasars, quarks, heat, James Bond, Street Fighter, Star Trek The Next Generation, Guatemalan money, a homophobic anti-Islamic political organization, every rational number, Chulakwi Kwodoshka, a programming language named after it, although that is true for every letter, and queer. All in all, for a letter grade, the letter Q is getting A D. It's getting a D. Just because it's cool and weird doesn't mean it gets a good score. It's still a useless letter. 6 P out of 10. Now, the letter D is spelled out as a word as D, but in the plural, if you're talking about more than one letter's D, it's spelled Ds. Now, all things considered, D is a pretty boring letter. It's consistent enough, the shape is pretty standard, run-of-the-mill, it's writable. Sometimes if you write it too fast, the capital form can look like a capital O, which is a shame. However, it does mean schlong, which is a massive plus. Many extra points for that. As an extension of that, you could say D-hole as a valid construction, although I've never heard anyone actually say that in the wild. It's not a pre-existing word, but I think it is fair to say it could be. For a letter grade, I would give it a D, but I think that's a bit harsh, so instead I'm giving it 2 Ds. Nuts across your chin. 6.66 out of 10. Now, one would assume that the only letter that's pronounced with the letter D is the letter D, but we don't always get what we want, now do we? Alright, listen. We gotta get the elephant in the room out of the way. It's not a double U, it's a double V. You could write it like 2 actual U's connected to each other. Some people do that, but the issue with the name W is not that it is inaccurate. I don't think double V would be much of an improvement either. The letter is unrelated at this point in history from both U and V. In German, this letter is called V and it goes V. That makes sense to me, but yet in English, the sound that the letter represents is not anywhere in the actual name of the actual letter. At least with G or C, well, those letters are sometimes pronounced that way. People sometimes pronounce H as H. So tell me why the letter that goes W starts with a D. Listen, this letter just really has nothing going for it. It's way too wide, and this affects how long it takes to write the letter. Getting it to look good and fixed with fonts or low resolutions is a challenge. It's not even consistent. There's plenty of examples of it being silent or part of a vowel. It's pitiful. It is synonymous with winning, unfortunately, despite being a garbage letter, but it is not winning this time. It is getting an F. 1.2 out of 10. On a less deeply mournful note, E is the most common letter in the written English language, but is its extreme frequency deserved? No, it's kind of cheating to call it the most common letter at all because it doesn't really even do anything in most cases. It's completely up in the air what its pronunciation is in any given position. Half the time it doesn't even make a sound at all, it just shows up all the time and pretends to have a use. Like women. Markiplier popularized the letter E in modern times. I appreciate how the lowercase and uppercase letters are distinct from one another, but still have noticeable similarities. But the lowercase e needs to be way more simple to write, given how common it is. To be honest, it should really just be a line or something. I will admit it is at least not as egregious as the letter A on this front, but it's still bad. Now, the letter E actually has a numerical value attached to it due to its significance to mathematics in the form of Euler's number. The letter E gets an E out of 10, which is like 2 point something, I think, I don't remember. It also gets E as a letter grade too. And that's the whole alphabet, A through E, all 9 letters. Okay, so I'm gonna split the video into a few parts. The rest of the alphabet will come. I guess I just had a lot to say about the letter R. But that's what happens on the Everything Review. Make sure to suck the subscribe button off.